Well, thank you for having me here today. I think I'm the last presentation before the lesson plan discussion session. So I just wanted to let you know that in light of the fact that you've had to listen to a lot of presentations and information today, I'm going to keep the presentation part of the hour fairly short. So I thought I would talk for about 15 minutes and then take some questions and then actually do a sort of interactive exercise with everyone. I'm Stephanie. I work for an agriculture organization called One Acre Fund, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about whether or not smallholder farmers can, at some point in the future, feed the world. It's a somewhat provocative question in agriculture development circles where a lot of thinking is that we really need large-scale commercial farming to seriously increase food production to feed our growing population. But I think the experience of the organization that I work for is that it could be very possible for smallholder farmers to be a significant contribution to global food supplies, and I'll talk a little bit about why that is. So One Acre Fund started about 6 years ago, and we serve smallholder farmers in East Africa, and we define the smallholder farmer as someone who has under 5 acres of land, so a pretty small piece of land. We invest in families, and those families double their farm impact per planted acre. Though we are a nonprofit organization, farmers pay for all of the services that they receive from us, so in effect, we are just like a business offering them services, but in terms of the way that we're organized, we're a nonprofit so that we can accept donations. We serve about 135,000 farmers in 3 countries in East Africa, and we'll serve 180,000 in about a year. Our client lives in Kenya, Rwanda, and Burundi in East Africa. So we already heard a little bit from Kenya earlier today from Sam, and our farmers are predominantly in Western Kenya, which is a high rainfall, high potential agriculture zone. Our clients, like most of the world's poor, have the same dilemma. They need to feed a family of 6 with 1 or 2 acres of land and simple hand tools. So an acre is about the size of a football field. Most of these farmers are what one could call hungry farmers. They're actually not producing enough food from their own land to feed their families. Because these farmers are using basic hand tools and outdated farming techniques, it actually presents a tremendous opportunity for increasing food production and food security. I just wanted to talk a little bit actually about the formal definition of food security and what that is and how that relates to smallholder farmers. The Food and Agriculture Organization defines food security on 4 measures. The first is access. So can people actually have the option of buying food at their local market? Is food available where they live? There's the I'm sorry, I confuse access and availability. So access, can you actually afford the food that is available to you at the market? Do you have money to buy it? The second issue is availability. Is there actually food to buy at the market? The third is use. So this broadly covers nutritional issues. If you're able to purchase that food, do you know how to prepare it in a way that your family is actually getting all the nutrients that they need to be healthy? And the fourth is stability over time. So not that just for part of the year you can go to the market and find food, but for all of the year, can you do that? And I would say that the majority of the smallholder farmers that One Acre Fund works with, they are food secure before they start working with us for 3 months of the year. At harvest and for the 3 months after harvest, they have the food that they have grown on their own land. So they have access to it. It's available to them because they grew it themselves. They know how to cook it correctly for maximum nutritional value, but they don't have that fourth component, stability over time. So for many families, for 9 months of the year, they don't have access to that food. They grow enough for 3 months, and then they run out, and that's the hunger season that Sam talked about. So One Acre Fund believes that this actually presents a tremendous opportunity. If you can help these hungry farmers grow not just enough food to feed themselves, but other members of the community around them, you have the potential for a tremendous increase in food output in sub-Saharan Africa. There's been tremendous productivity gains in Asia, in the United States, in Europe, but crop yields in sub-Saharan Africa still lag significantly. So if we're looking globally for a place where we can see big gains in food output, it's going to come from Africa. And because most farmers in Africa are those small farmers with small pieces of land, a green revolution or serious increase in productivity in Africa is not going to happen through the commercial agriculture methods that we see currently in the US and in Europe. It's just not possible. So the way that One Acre Fund works is through a 4-part service model. And what we say is that farmers can only benefit from agriculture finance if they have access to a number of other things. First, they need access to the seed and fertilizer that will actually make their land productive. They need to access that seed and fertilizer at an affordable price. They need training on how to use it correctly in the fields so that they can benefit from that financial outlay. And then they need access to markets after their harvest. So if they have a surplus, they can actually sell it, get a good amount of money that they can use for their other household expenses. Then there are climate risks, which we've heard about a bit already today, and sometimes cultural barriers. The operating model that we offer to our farmers systematically attacks all 4 of these areas. We like to call it a complete market in a box for the 1 acre farmer. It starts out with farm producer groups. So we go out into the communities where our farmers live, and we help farmers organize into groups of 6 to 15 people. And we give those groups loans. Instead of giving them cash, we actually give them seed and fertilizer. So we give them the asset that they need to increase their productivity, and they repay us in cash over the course of the agriculture season. We also offer them education and training. A lot of subsistence farmers, they don't have access to improved seed varieties, they don't have access to fertilizers, so they don't know how to use those things. Traditional planting methods involve taking your hand, putting it into a bag of seed, and throwing the seed in the field. For a long time, that was a successful way to plant, but people's soils are really degraded now, and that just doesn't work anymore. And if you add fertilizer into that mix, and you take the seed, throw it in the field, and then take a handful of fertilizer and also throw it in the field, you're burning your seed. So it's not going to germinate, and you've just spent a lot of money on fertilizer and seriously damaged your opportunity to get a good harvest. So training is incredibly important to the process. And finally, after farmers harvest, we provide them with some basic business training on market price fluctuations for the crops that they're growing and how they can use those fluctuations to their advantage to actually increase their profits. Before joining our organization, most farmers are net food purchasers, so they actually end up entering the market at the very worst time of the year when prices are highest. So to make the mental shift to become a seller at those prices, it is a very new concept for the small farmer. But I'm excited to say that I actually know quite a few farmers who, after receiving this training, have now become purchasers of food at the lowest point in the market, just after harvest, and they're storing everything that they've produced at home and waiting to sell until the price is high. So they're buying low and selling high, which of course is, that's the way to make the most money. The second innovation that our organization offers to farmers is deep rural distribution. This star is the only place in this district in Rwanda, it's about 100 miles, this map, where you can buy seed and fertilizer. So one place where a farmer can go to purchase seed and fertilizer. If you live, unless you live here, there's no way you can get there, even if you live here. Rwanda is incredibly hilly, and it would take someone 8 to 10 hours just to get to that star. One Acre Fund has set up a network of rural distribution points so that a farmer only has to walk about 1.5 miles to pick up seed and fertilizer. They don't have to walk for 10 hours. They don't have to pay a high transportation fee to get to those inputs. They just walk about 30, 45 minutes, pick up their seed and fertilizer, and carry it home. And this distribution network means that the farmer can also receive extension and training very close to where they live. Each one of these pinpoints is staffed by a full-time salaried One Acre Fund employee who offers education and training sessions to farmers over the course of the agriculture season, from planting all the way through to harvest. And they offer those training sessions to farmers in the fields where they're living and working. So it's very practical, it's very interactive. The field officer, the One Acre Fund staff person, can actually observe farmers implementing the agriculture practices correctly in the field and give them feedback if they're not doing something correctly. And we think that this method of working with rural smallholder farmers is broadly scalable. We've got one field officer, that's a local staff person, doing the loan repayment collection as well as the extension and training, providing that service bundle to about 225 farm families with 900 children each. And that one field officer doesn't have an office. They're based in the field. They spend 5 days of the week walking around, talking to their farmers, understanding what's going on with germination rates, who's having a problem with top dress application, who's having problems with their tree seedling transplants. They know everything that's going on because they're right there and very accessible. And one day a week, they go into their district office and meet with the other field officers in their geographic area to share lessons learned, challenges, and also share their key performance indicators for the week. So they collect a lot of metrics that they have to report up. They share them with their colleagues and also with their manager, the field director of the district. And it means that there's just a constant feedback loop from all of those farmers, those 135,000 farmers, and the upper level management of the organization. So it means that we can be very flexible and responsive to what farmers are, problems that they're facing or additional products or services that they want. Just to make this a little bit more concrete, I just wanted to share one farmer story with you guys. This is a farmer that I know really well in Western Kenya. Her name is Lydia Musila. I first met her in late 2009. She had joined One Acre Fund about 6 months before that, and she had planted beans, a very small amount of beans, 1/4 of an acre, less than this, like between here and there, and then to the windows. And she had a really great harvest, the best bean harvest she had ever had. So she kept a little bit of it at home to feed her family, and she sold the rest at the market. She made about $130 US. For her, this was an incredibly large amount of money. She is a person who lives on under $1 a day. And the first thing she decided to do was fix up her house. This is the roof of her old house. It's a thatch roof, as you can see. She's been patching it up with plastic when it rains. And whenever the rainy season came, her kids were getting wet. And she really wanted to build a new house, but never thought she would have the money for it. This is Lydia at one of her training sessions, actually telling all of the farmers in her community, the other 200 farmers that work with One Acre Fund, about the new house that she's started to build. She took her $130 and bought tree poles and iron sheets and built this house. The last time I visited her, she had completed the door, and she actually had a padlock on the door, which for her was a sign that she was moving up in the community. And I like to share Lydia's story because she's not an extraordinary farmer. She's not the best farmer in her community. She doesn't have the nicest piece of land. In fact, she has a husband who doesn't help her out with the farming at all. She does everything herself. But she has managed to build this house. Now she's bought a cow. She's been actually improving her English language skills. And she just needed that initial investment to be able to do these things. We didn't give her seed and fertilizer for free. She paid for it herself. And she continues to take loans from One Acre Fund because she's continuing to make investments in her agriculture business. This is just to show a few pictures of what a maize harvest looks like before the use of improved seed and fertilizer and after. The harvest. This is a training session in Rwanda. This is the planting string that we use for seed spacing. So farmers space their seeds along a row at equal intervals, and then they also space the rows evenly through the field. And then I also just wanted to tell you a little bit about One Acre Fund's growth projections as an organization to show you that with a combined service model that uses the distribution of inputs, financing, education, and market facilitation, it is possible for smallholder farmers to significantly increase their food production, to triple it, in fact, and contribute towards feeding the world. We originally projected that at this time we would be serving about 60,000 farmers. At the beginning of 2011, we revised those projections upward, primarily because the farmer demand for our services has been so high. Once we start working in a community and farmers see the harvests of their neighbors who are working with One Acre Fund, they immediately want to join and take loans themselves. So it really is a sort of viral marketing technique where you see that great maize harvest and say, yeah, I want that loan too. So since that has really taken off, our current growth projections are that by the end of 2013, we'll be serving 225,000 families. That happens because we are field-based. We're listening to the advice that our farmers are giving us all the time about how to make things better. I think Sam mentioned this earlier today. These communities have been doing farming or raising livestock for a long, long time. In many cases, they know exactly what they need, but they just need access to the tools or financing to actually accomplish those things. This is just to show the impact of the service model. Our farmers are roughly tripling their harvests, which, when you take out the cost of the financing and the cost of the seed and fertilizer, is about a doubling in profit per planted acre. So a significant income increase in just 1 year. And as an organization, we are moving towards financial sustainability. So last year, we collected about $4.3 million in loan revenue from our farmers, and this year we'll collect about $11.5 million. And that will cover about 85% of our field operating costs. So I mentioned before that we're a nonprofit organization so that we can accept donations. And in our startup phase, of course, we need support from donors to provide this service model. We're addressing a market failure, essentially. But 6 years in, we are now covering 85% of our operating costs through loan revenue from our clients. So these are farmers with small pieces of land and very little capital, and they are paying almost completely for the services that they're receiving. And we think, once we get to that 100%, it's a pretty powerful argument for why these farmers should be receiving these services all over sub-Saharan Africa. By 2020, we hope to build the largest network of these farmers in sub-Saharan Africa, serving 1.5 million families per year with 6 million children in those families. We'll have over 7,000 staff, and we'll be working in 5 to 8 countries. We also hope to use that as an opportunity to partner with the government. The agriculture sector is incredibly complicated. We also need things like rural roads, and we're not going to be building those ourselves. And we think that the government really should be doing that. If we have 1.5 million farm families, we have a pretty powerful platform to take to any government in a country where we're working to say, these constituents are saying that what they need are roads. They're going to increase the economic output of this country if they have roads, and you should be building them, and we can tell you exactly where. So we're really excited about that opportunity. And finally, we're trying to help build a broader movement of organizations that are working in agriculture finance. So microfinance has been a tremendous success story in the development world in the last 15 years. But most microfinance institutions are not working with farmers. They're working in cities, and they're working in the suburbs, the places where it's really easy to find clients and the cost of operating is low. So we're trying to convince some of those microfinance institutions that they should come out to the rural areas where we're working. That is a place where you can have a business and have a lot of impact. So we seek to be a pioneer in the world's efforts to make agriculture technology accessible to small farmers. And in the process, help contribute to the increases in global food supply that we need to feed the world. So I think if we can move into Q&A now for maybe about 10 to 15 minutes, whatever you guys want.
Can you speak to some of the individual problems you have politically or economically? How do you decide where you're going to work?
Yeah.
And has that been a real challenge?
That's an excellent question. I think it's kind of interesting to look at the 3 countries where we're working right now. We started working in Kenya in 2006, and at the end of 2007, there was a pretty serious post-election crisis that involved a lot of ethnic violence throughout the country. We did not shut down our operations at that time. We continued working. But it was certainly a reminder that a country that you think is a really stable place to work is not always stable. We also work in Rwanda, which frankly is a fantastic place to work. The government is really on top of things. They have a great agriculture development strategy. We partner directly with them, and they are creating a better enabling environment for agriculture. We're also working in Burundi, which is a post-conflict country similar to Rwanda, but one that hasn't received the same donor interest or financial support. Burundi is a very difficult country to work, and we are not working much with the government there. But when we did an analysis of places that of greatest need, Burundi was almost at the top of the list. When we look at expansion countries, we're looking for places that have high population density, because our model works best in those places. For places that have reliable rainfall. Believe it or not, there are still a lot of places like that in sub-Saharan Africa. And third, places where fertilizer usage is very, very low. And then I guess the 4th qualification would be where the poverty level is high and the need is great. I think in 2011, Burundi was ranked the 3rd most food insecure country in the world, behind Afghanistan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So when you look at a place that has great need, it's certainly at the top of the list. So we try to balance that need with the operating environment that we would face. And for instance, right now, we are about to start a trial in Ethiopia. I personally do not consider Ethiopia to be a great enabling environment for agriculture due to the way that the government operates in Ethiopia, but the need in Ethiopia is very high. So, yeah. I hope that answers the question.
My question, are you finished with that question? I'm over here on the other side.
Sorry, okay.
My question is about the land itself.
Yeah.
Do you work on high quality land? Is it medium? Can you do your project on low quality land? And to what extent are you limited from going into some places by land quality?
That's a really interesting question. So we are not really limited by land quality, I would say. I've talked to many of our clients who have said, I thought that my land was cursed or that my land was not suitable for growing anything before I joined One Acre Fund, and now I know that that's not true. Most people do have nutrient deficits in their land at this point in time. They've been farming year after year after year without letting the land lie fallow for a season or doing any kind of crop rotation to get nitrogen back into the soil for a long time. So the land does need an injection of nutrients, but we would never take a farmer who wanted to enroll with us and say, your land isn't good enough, we won't work with you. We are doing training with our farmers over time so that everyone's overall land quality increases through doing things like composting and crop rotation to reintroduce nitrogen into the soil, as well as doing tree planting, which also can fix nitrogen. But land is not a barrier for us, I would say. What is actually is rainfall level. We have an operating model that works in high rainfall and reliable rainfall areas. So when we start to look at arid or semi-arid areas, we need to develop a new product offering that will work in that area. And that's something that we're actually working on for a semi-arid part of Kenya right now. And we think that it should be possible, but it's going to require some research and innovation to make that happen. Yeah.
Just had a question about the long-term viability of this model. In particular, whether it can coexist with or compete with mass consumer agriculture. In some ways, the three states they're unique in that they're isolated from the global marketplace. Some of that's geography, but some of it is just being disconnected from the world. What happens when they become more integrated with the global marketplace? And does that model continue to produce goods and services that can compete globally or regionally?
That's a great question. I mean, I don't think anyone would say that right now the farmers that we work with are producing food at globally competitive prices. Their cost of production is quite high. However, they're selling into markets where people also have similarly high costs of production. So it is viable for them. But I do think that what we will see over time, and what we're starting to see a little bit even now, is land consolidation. So some people in the community who are not interested in being farmers anymore or have moved away to Nairobi and have a job there are selling their land to some of our clients. So we're starting to see increase in average land holding, and it's very early, right? We have very few clients who have been with us for 3 or 4 years, so I think it's too early for us to make kind of scientific conclusions on this. We need to wait a little longer, I think, so we have a bigger sample size. But I think that what we would like to see happen is that continued consolidation process so that basically farming does become more lucrative for the individual farmer. With a larger piece of land, you're able to start mechanizing, you can start diversifying your crop mix to include not just staple foods, but maybe some high-value cash crops like mushrooms or peppers, or even a little tree farm. But when you're land constrained, that's tricky. It's tricky to be very diversified on a very small piece of land. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay. Mm-hmm.
What is your most effective form of communication with farmers? How do you do it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say the most effective form of communication is face-to-face training. I think in the agriculture development world, as I'm sure there also is in the world of teaching, a lot of talk about technology and how technology can change the learning process and make information accessible to so many more people. But technology is just a tool, and there's a lot of talk in agriculture about how to reach small farmers with mobile phone technology, sending them information and messages through text messages. In our experience, people don't want to adopt new practices unless someone shows them how to do it. So if you were to receive a message on your phone saying, the way to plant maize is to space your rows 75 meters apart and space the seeds along the row 25 centimeters. A farmer would just look at that and delete it. But, I mean, just to be totally honest, they're not going to do anything with that information. But if there's someone standing in the field where they plant their maize saying, this is how you plant maize, and actually goes through the exercise of showing them the 75 centimeters, the 25 centimeters between seeds, they're actually going to do it because they learned how with that person on their land. And the person who's teaching them is generally also a farmer. It's someone who comes from a similar background and understands the challenges that they're facing. So I think face-to-face communication is best. Maybe.
Where do the seeds come from? Is that from their own farming practices shared in the community, or do you guys provide them with seeds?
So we actually provide them with seeds. They are, we buy seeds from private sector seed companies in the countries where we're working. So for instance, in Kenya, we source seed from 3 different companies that all produce locally. GMO seed is not currently legal in a lot of countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So all of the seed that we use is hybrid seed. It's bred for particular seed characteristics, a short growing season for maize or resistance to drought, but it's not genetically modified. Yeah, and just on the issue of saved seed, I think there are some benefits to saved seed for certain kinds of certain crops. For beans in Rwanda, for instance, we would generally sell bean seed to a farmer like in season 1, and then they would save seed for 4 to 5 seasons after that, and they would plant that, and they would get good yields. But we would say to them after 5 seasons, please come back to us and buy again, because the quality of your seed after 5 seasons is going to be so degraded that you're not going to be getting your money's worth out of the fertilizer that you're putting on that land. So I think saved seed can be good in certain situations. Anyone else? Okay, I think then let's move on to the group exercise. So everyone should have a copy of actually the One Acre Fund planting training for maize in Kenya. No, you don't have one. Some people have it. Can you raise your hand if you don't have it? 1, 2, 4, I think, on this side. Yeah, people can share. I think it's fine.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing with individuals at your table.
So I thought it might be interesting for you guys to come up with some training ideas for our farmers in a different context, not planting. I gave you the planting training as an example, so you can see the kinds of exercises that our field staff would do with farmers to teach them a new skill. One area that we've been actually revising our trainings a lot recently and is on post-harvest storage and the importance of safe storage. And I was hoping to get ideas from all of you, and I think maybe you can work in groups based on where you're seated at tables. Maybe if you wouldn't mind joining another table so that you have someone, yeah? Okay, else to work with. In your groups, come up with some interactive suggestions on how to teach farmers about two things. First, the importance of storing safely. And to store safely, you need to do two things. You need to dry your maize fully so that there's no moisture. And when you store it, you need to elevate it above the ground so that moisture doesn't seep in from the dirt into your bags of maize and cause them to start rotting. So that's the first idea. And then the second idea is about the economic benefit of storage. So I'd like you guys to come up with ideas on exercises to explain to a farmer how, if they wait to sell their maize until a time when the market prices are high, they can make 200% more money than if they sell at harvest. So, ideas on that. And I think, let's see, it's about 10 after, so maybe 10 minutes to work in the groups, and then 10 minutes for each group to present their best idea. I was hoping that each group could share their best idea with the rest of the room. Does any group want to volunteer to be the first?
All right, so we discussed the delaying market.
Yeah.
Delaying going to market until later. We talked about making and having a certain amount of objects. If everybody has an object, then there's no real incentive to really work for everybody to have. There's a surplus. But if there's only two objects and there are 4 farmers, who's going to get it? What are you willing to trade with me in order to get this? And so working on this idea of supply and demand and showing the basis of if you wait to go to market, the people who need food will be more willing to pay more for it.
I like it. That is good. Do you have any suggestions on what objects to use?
Something available that's interesting.
Soda. People love soda. Yeah. Thank you. I really like that. Supply and demand for shortage of objects. Great. Thanks.
We were talking about the same waiting to sell your corn, and we decided we would have 12 volunteers sit on the stage there, and have each volunteer represent a month of the year. And January would be $1, February $2, $3, and so on. And we would have the 1 acre field representative walk to each one, representing each month, and say to them, how much will you pay for corn? And then say, when would you rather sell? Who would you rather sell to? This month or this month?
So making it completely tangible, the difference as the year progresses.
Right.
Thank you.
So talk about keeping the corn dry and deciding to use cooking corn example.
And the way we did it was if you put something very wet in hot oil, it's a mess and
Splatters.
put different degrees of wetness. And then, of course, the final thing would be something very dry that you put in there, and it's perfect.
Oh, that's very interesting because you could actually even do that with maize kernels. If you had one which hadn't been dried at all versus one that was completely dry, to show the difference. Next group.
Rico Goodstein at the University of Illinois Chicago has written a book called Teaching Math. This isn't the title, but it's close. Teaching Mathematics for Social Justice. And in there he's got a number of activities that he developed. And one of them is called the Transnational Capital Game. And it's for kids to, it just gives you the structure of a game where they buy and sell, and they sort of, they represent a company, or they represent an agent who's selling for global companies in a third world country, and they're trying to keep their workers happy by paying them enough money that they're happy, and at the same time increasing profits. So they're sort of caught in the middle of all that. But there are fluctuations, and in the end, you know, they learn a lot about that process. So I was thinking that that same game could be adapted for this context. And just, if kids are, you know, they're going to be, well, kids or anybody who's into the game is going to be trying to end up ahead. And so they're going to learn eventually, if you say, you know, we've got a timeline and this is how the price is going to change, and you keep playing the game, they're going to figure out how to do it. You don't have to tell them anything at all, because if it's done, you know, in these abbreviated sessions. So.
It's called Mathematics for Social Justice, or something like that?
Something like Teaching Math for Social Justice. Okay. I'll find out the title of it for you.
Thank you.
It's close to.
We also discussed how cultural change would be important in changing the culture of the village. And we had a lot of brainstorming ideas, but we also thought about targeting the children of the group, and through nursery rhyme or other such methods. And we also kind of connected it to how in this country children will learn about recycling in preschool, kindergarten, and so forth. And maybe they're the ones who influence their parents at home to recycle. And so maybe a similar thing would be done in the village communities where the children could become part of the solution too. And again, perhaps through mathematical games or other types of learning.
I think that we haven't heard from this group or this group or this group here. These guys contributed already. They had the object game.
Going back to why it's important to dry or keep the harvest dry, my first thought was to have everybody lie on the floor and be like, look, now you're dry, and then pour water on them and then see what happens when it gets wet. But the group decided against that. So the best idea was talk to them about how they wash their clothes, and when you're washing your clothes, that if it's wet, go ahead and fold them up. You know, what happens to it, obviously you want to make sure that they're dry before you put them away. So.
I kind of like that idea of dumping water on someone. We've found that exercises where one person gets embarrassed in front of the rest of the group is, people love them. I was telling this group in the corner here, I think, about one of those exercises. I think, is there anyone else who wants to contribute?
It's not a fully developed activity, but to demonstrate, you know, how seeds would get rotted in water. Maybe have a couple people stick their hands in cold water for a long time. You know how your fingers get all great. Like,
yeah.
I don't know, maybe that would be some sort of game to embarrass someone. Free with fingers.
Thank you.
For the wait time, we had thought about if you didn't wait, you could purchase like 1 cow. And if you did wait it, you waited longer, you could purchase maybe, you know, something visual. You could purchase 5.
Yeah.
And so that, you know, it's important to wait to get a better yield for your money's worth, because, you know, certain animals are considered worth a lot more money. You know, 1 cow may be something, but 5 cows would be much, you know, better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, like in the case of our farmers, for instance, a chicken is something that's not that difficult to buy, or even like a goat is fairly accessible for a lot of people, but a cow, and especially a good cow that's going to be producing milk regularly, that's like, everyone wants a cow. It's a big status symbol. So yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate all of your ideas on this, and I hope that it also gave you a little glimpse into what our field staff are doing on a weekly basis as they try to come up with ways to teach our farmers, basic business principles or things about market fluctuations, or even something which seems really simple, like how to store your crops safely, has lots of different components. People are asking me questions about how many steps are the drying process, is the drying process, what does that look like, how does it happen, and just to give you guys a little window into what agriculture extension looks like. And thank you so much for your time and attention. I really appreciate it.